Hey there, welcome back to Badass Messaging. We're still in Module 4, Brand Messaging, and here in Lesson 3, we're going to talk about heaven, hell, and your origin story. These are very important things that you need to develop for your messaging and to really understand these things. And the heaven and the hell we'll talk about first, but they also will feed into the origin story. So I want you to understand this is about basically describing situations about kind of, where your audience is, where they want to be, etc., in a way that will truly resonate with them. So the truth bomb for this lesson is that accurately describing your audience's pain points, frustrations, and dreams creates a level of trust that is hard to match. And that's why this is so important in your messaging. When you nail these pieces, you will go a long way to having people look at you and say, wow, Bobby gets me, in my case, or wow, whatever your name is, gets me. And that's the thing that builds a trust level with your audience that can inspire action. So that's the big truth bomb. Here are the things we're going to talk about specifically. We're going to talk about how to identify your audience's heaven and hell, how to create your origin story, and then how to identify aspirational language to use with your audience. And that last piece, a lot of people would put within the heaven, but I break it out for a very important reason and to help you kind of think it through. So we're going to talk about each of those. Let's dive in. We're starting with finding your audience's heaven and hell. Now, the thing I want you to get is that identifying your audience's pain points, frustrations, and goals is an essential part of messaging. Now, we're not going to talk about everywhere that this applies in your messaging because it applies so many different places. If you look at templates for things, people will often talk about, well, describe your audience's pain points or frustrations. Or you'll hear when we get to like product messaging, things like future pacing. And future pacing is about goals. It's about describing where your audience wants to be. So these are things that will work through your messaging all over the place. So we've got to figure out how do we find them. And the way I like to kind of describe this is using this matrix, if you will. So on the bottom half is what your audience wants to avoid. On the top is what your audience wants, the things they want to achieve. On the left is kind of the present. And then on the right is things that might happen in the future. So this is kind of a matrix we've had. And what I like to do is think through this in a way to look at it. Now, the first is kind of on the bottom side. You have frustrations and fears. Frustrations, if you will, are the present tense. These are the things your audience is currently dealing with, is currently struggling with. It's not something that might happen in the future. It's something that is currently happening right now that they don't like. So that's kind of what a frustration is. Now, a fear is a bad thing that hasn't happened yet, but that your audience might be worried will happen if they don't take action, right? So that's the difference between a frustration and a fear. And it's important to understand that distinction because one of the things you'll hear me talk about, and we're going to talk about using fears in a bit, is using fears is dicey. And so frustrations will generally be a much safer place to be. But you need to distinguish the two. The frustrations is what is happening right now that they're struggling with. Fears is something they're worried might happen in the future. Now let's look at the positive side. Now, the present tense positive is goals. These are the things they want. They want to be experiencing this right now. Like it's not like 3 years down the line or anything like that. It's like, no, I want a successful business, for example. I want to be making money in my business. It's kind of an immediate, what will my immediate experience of success be? That's goals. Then aspirations is the future tense of what they want. So what do I really want? I mean, what is the purpose of reaching those goals in a sense? And so that's the idea is, hey, those goals will help me get to my aspirations 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever that is. So that's kind of the idea of the breakdown and thinking of this matrix. Now, with this in mind, let's talk about the different pieces. The hell refers to the pain of your audience's situations. What are their frustrations related to your area of expertise? So this is the bottom left quadrant. It is what are their frustrations and or pain points in the present. So it's not future tense, it's not fears. It is the present tense What are they frustrated with? Now, here's the warning I wanted to give you about with fears. Talking about their fears can be powerful, but it can backfire and feel like you're trying to manipulate them. So tread carefully. Now, a lot of people will tell you to lean into the fears in describing the hell. They will say, talk about what they're afraid of, talk about all those things. Now, I think there's a couple of problems with that. Now, what I would say is if everyone in your audience has the same fear and is experiencing that fear right now, okay, talking about that makes sense. Because that is, in a sense, a frustration or a pain point they have right now. Experiencing the fear is a pain point. The problem, of course, is that the chances that the majority of your audience are suffering or struggling with the same fear right now and actually experiencing it isn't that high. And the people who are not currently experiencing the fear, if you lean into that and describe that, they're going to say, man, this person is trying to make me feel like crap. That doesn't create goodwill. And so that's the difficulty with using fears. It can feel manipulative, like you are fear-mongering to get people to buy. Now, I can't give you an exact line here. I can't kind of describe something and say, well, here's where it's okay and here's where it's not. You have to use some discretion, but I simply want you to understand that leaning into fears can backfire. So I want you to think about it and think carefully before you do it. So that's the hell. Now let's talk about the heaven. The heaven refers to your audience's kind of immediate goals. How would they describe the immediate success from a service like yours? Like, what are they trying to get? Like in my case, build a successful business, like build a business that makes money, right? That's what they want. And so another way to think about it is that the heaven is about kind of the tangible results that directly relate to your service. It's not going deeper of saying, what do they really want at a deep level? That's aspirations that we'll talk about later. In describing the heaven, you want to describe the things that are immediately possible for someone as a result of your service. And so that's kind of describing the heaven. Now, we've gone through this and you might be saying, okay, great. Well, how do I identify those? And here's what I want to suggest to you. What you're trying to do is find your audience's words, not yours. Find how they would describe it. And there's a few different ways to do it. First, you can consume content. See how other people who serve your ideal customers are talking. You will often find, if you listen to podcasts or read blog posts or whatever it is, but consume the content that's being created for your audience, you'll discover how other people are describing the pain points, the frustrations, and what success looks like. Now, it's not always going to be right, but it's a good first step. And what I would say is when you're starting out, finding someone who is further along, who has had some success serving your audience, that's a good place because they've probably done some of this work, and so they understand it more than you do. So it's a first step. Now, a next level is to be among your people. Literally spend time in groups and communities with your people and listen to them. This is not about asking. It's not about going into Facebook groups and doing, quote, market research and posting those things in a group that you don't spend time in. No, it's about being with your people. One of the things that I've explained to people often is that one of the keys to my success was that I spend a lot of time, and when I was really kind of getting to the point of going from struggling entrepreneur to a successful entrepreneur, what I was doing was spending time in Facebook groups, just being with my people, listening to them and seeing what they were talking about. Because you, as a member of the community, as a fly on the wall, you'll get a lot of insights. So that's kind of the next level up because you're with your people. And then the final thing is, if you have an audience, ask them directly. Literally ask them these questions. What are they struggling with? What's their biggest pain point? But also ask them what success looks like. Because finding what success looks like is just as important as asking what they struggle with. Like, a lot of people focus exclusively on telling you to ask about their pain points. And that stuff's okay. I mean, you should know that. But I want you to also understand what success looks like, because knowing that and describing success in a way that speaks to your audience will be powerful, and that will really help you understand kind of what people are looking for. So that's a notion that I want you to get. A small example of this, of understanding what success looks like and how this can shape messaging. We'll talk about kind of aspirational stuff that ties into this later, but my audience, when I ask them, how will you know when you're successful? Because most of the people in the online marketing space, talking to online marketers, are talking about figures like build a 6-figure business, build a multiple 6-figure business, build a 7-figure, whatever. And I asked my audience, and I don't say none of them, but I don't think hardly any of them used numbers. What they said is, I would like to have a business that I enjoy running that will replace my 9-to-5 income. That was the most common answer. And if you think about that, knowing that little fact, knowing that that's what people want, allows me to shape messaging in a way that will reach them way more directly than if I was talking about building a 6-figure business or a 7-figure business or something like that, that there's a disconnect. Because what people are saying is, look, I want a business I enjoy that replaces my 9-to-5. And so now I can lean into that in talking about what I can help them achieve. And so that's an example of doing that and surveying your audience and understanding what they believe success to be is also powerful. Now, ultimately, the goal of all of this is to use their words to describe the heaven and the hell. And that's what you're trying to do with this process, because finding the heaven and hell will help you craft stories, describe how you serve, and describe the benefits of working with you. That's what you're going to use all of this for. So that's finding the heaven and the hell. Now let's talk about one very specific place where you're going to use the heaven and hell messaging, and that's the origin story. So let's talk about how to craft an origin story. And if you don't know what an origin story is, it's the story of how you got to be where you are serving the people you're serving now. It's kind of that simple. But what I want you to get is that the origin story is one of the most powerful stories you will want in your story arsenal. Like, having it in there is going to help you connect with people at a very deep level, because what it does is it lets you kind of talk about why you want to help them, but it's also a powerful conversion story in most cases. There's a caveat to that. But for most of us, our origin story will serve both to connect us with our audience and to help convert them into buyers, because ultimately what it is us as a case study. And that is the case if you walked in the shoes of your ideal customer, right? If you walked and you're kind of ahead of where your ideal customer is, you've learned something and you're applying it, your origin story will kind of describe you living in the hell and getting to the heaven. That's what you're going to do for your origin story. So think about what that does. When you do this, they're like, wow, Bobby struggled with the same things I'm struggling with, and he's not now. So number one, the fact that I struggle with it makes me relatable, connects me with them, and using that language will connect me with them. But then they can see me as an inspiration of someone who is broken through. And so that will help to convert. So let's talk about the flow of this kind of origin story. Literally, this is the order it goes in. Now, how long you tell it, you can tell these stories, in 30 seconds, in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, however long you have. But here's the basic flow. You start with the hell. You describe how you were struggling using the words that your audience uses to describe their pain points, their frustrations, okay? And you can use your fears, because talking about your fears, if they are legitimate, is not fear-mongering. It's literally talking about what you were doing, and that will connect with people who are feeling those same fears. That vulnerability can be very powerful. Then you talk about the change. Describe how you did something different, and obviously this should be related to how you help them, right? What was it that you started doing differently that was kind of the pivot point, the main change that helped you get out of the hell? Now, again, I want to be clear, and you want to always be clear with people, that it was not one thing. I mean, there isn't one thing that you started doing differently and that suddenly, boom, I went from, struggling to a millionaire. That's not how it works, but it could be a shift in approach that led to multiple things in a snowball. But it could be that you just have to find that pivot point. What was that point, that change you made? And again, this should relate to how you're going to help them. And so you'll describe that moment of change. And then you'll talk about how now you're living in the heaven. And so you'll describe it using their words again. And it should be this natural flow of you were in the heaven, you made this change, and it helped you get to the heaven. And now you help your audience make that exact same change. That's how you describe your origin story of telling how it is that you got to be here doing what you do, serving the people you serve. So that is the classic origin story if you are in this case of having walked the journey in front of your current audience. Now, there is some people who that's not true for. If your story is about expertise, not experience, what you want to do is tell a story of seeing the hell that your audience was in and helping them get to the heaven and your reason for doing it, okay? But you want to talk about yourself in the process. So why is it that you're someone who's qualified to do it? This was what I had to do with my origin story when I was doing the legal stuff, right? I would talk about seeing people, my ideal customers, struggle and come to me with making a mistake after the mistake had been made and wanting me to fix it, and discovering that the reason they made the mistake is because they were afraid to, or they didn't want to spend the money on a lawyer, etc. And then I talk about that, and that was kind of an origin for me wanting to make the change and make it possible so entrepreneurs didn't have to go through that. So I was using the language and I was telling this story and my reason for doing it, but also obviously talking about my expertise as an attorney. So that's how you kind of wrap it up if you're expertise based. Now, regardless of your origin story and which type you're using, you want to make sure that you're including the heaven and hell language to help connect with the audience. Now, if you're in the traditional sense, you talk about how you went through the heaven or the hell and are now in the heaven. If you're not, you talk about seeing people in the hell and wanting to get them out of it. But you'll use that language no matter what. So that's your origin story in a nutshell. This is something you should spend time crafting and work on it and work on it and work on it, because really dialing this in will be very powerful for your brand. So that's origin stories. Now let's talk about the aspirational messaging. So this is something a lot of people would just put in and lump in with the heaven. I want to separate it out for a very important reason. This is about describing what your audience wants at a deep level that your offer makes possible for them. But let's talk about what it's not. Aspirational message isn't about the thing you deliver specifically. It's about what is possible because of the thing you deliver. In other words, if you help people build a successful business, aspirational messaging is not about the business. And it's not about making a particular amount of money. It's not about the direct results, if you will. Aspirational messaging is about what's possible because they get those results. It's why do those results matter? What is it about getting those results? What will that allow my audience to do? So, for example, for someone like me who helps people build their businesses, the aspirations aren't about business. They're about freedom, financial security, etc. It's about things that my audience ultimately wants, that having a business that makes money will give them, but it's not directly about the business, right? So that helps you to kind of get a sense here. Another example. One person, a woman in my coaching program, helps women to get financial literacy and understand the issues and get kind of confidence in their money. And part of what she says is one of the things that makes possible is they stop having money fights with their spouses. And so it leads to a better relationship. And she said most of her audience wants a better relationship with their spouse. Well, if you think about it, she's teaching financial literacy, but talking about how getting that financial literacy and understanding doing these things can help your relationship is a powerful piece of messaging, because that's what people want. Now, what I'll say is aspirational messaging can be very powerful if your audience tends to have similar aspirations, right? If most all of the people in your audience have the same kind of deep level aspiration, then lean into that. The difficulty can be if you have an audience where their aspirations are all over the place, right? Where the reason why they want a successful business are all very different. Then it can be difficult. And using aspirational messaging can kind of alienate certain groups because they're like, well, oh, clearly Bobby isn't speaking to me. Now, that can be the result of it. Some people look at that as a bad thing. And if people legitimately have different aspirations within your audience, you don't want to do that. But aspirational messaging can also help you narrow your audience by speaking to a particular group, by literally basically telling people, you're not literally doing it, but effectively telling people that I'm not for you if they don't share these aspirations. Now, it won't drive all the people away, but it sends a very powerful message. My example, in my business, we talk about helping you build a business to support your family, to make clear that I'm not talking to the private jet crowd. If you're looking, for a business to get you a mansion, a Lamborghini, and a private jet, I'm not here for that. Now, if you do it, great. But I'm here for the people who want to build a business they love that will support their family. And by saying that, I am going ahead and telling people, putting a stake in the ground, committing to lead a particular group, a particular audience. And so it will tend to keep the other folks and have the other folks recognize that I'm not going to be the one for them, which there's power in that as well. So that's another way you can use your aspirational message. But try to find the aspirations, and if you can find one that speaks to the majority of your audience, use it, because speaking into that will be powerful. So the big takeaway, understanding your audience's heaven, hell, and aspirations will help you shape powerful stories and messaging for your business. So take the time to understand what your audience wants. In the next lesson, you're going to discover how to craft various iterations of your bio for your business, which is an important piece too. So I'll see you in the next lesson.